G'day legends. So this weekend was UFC Vegas Apex 100 and 169. And also we had a former one double champion over at the UFC. It was quite a weird weekend for the alt tab movement. We were eating because everything that happened at the UFC prelims, it was about 2.5 hours of filler and about 5 minutes of fight time. That doesn't mean that it wasn't fun. But yeah, it was interesting. Let's get into it, right? If you don't know what the alt-tab movement is, by the way, because we don't watch WMMA on this channel, whenever there's a WMMA fight on, we just hit alt-tab and we go and watch something else. And One Championship was having their biggest pay-per-view of the year, one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year, UFC 169, so we watched that as well. I didn't live stream it all, but I was there on the couch watching it all. It was a bit of a quiet weekend around the house this weekend, but let's break it all down. So when I was alt-tabbing across, because one had already happened, I was watching it back. So I started from the top down, and then as I was watching the UFC, I watched it, the normal way, the way that we all watch it, from the prelims up to the main event. That is how I'm going to be breaking down the card over the weekend. Let's start over at UFC 169, which was a heavyweight main event, Malkin versus Rug. And if this goes to show you that heavyweight isn't horrible everywhere, I don't know what does. This was a absolutely terrible fight, even with One Championship's ability to be able to reset fighters whenever they're stalling. If fighters do not want to fight, there isn't a lot you can do about it, even when you are finding them in the cage. I simply do not know what to do except maybe just give up on heavyweight everywhere. If you see any highlights of this fight, you are going to see them absolutely swinging at each other, not blocking anything, just old school, holding the back of their head and throwing fists. That is round three's highlights. That is what round three was. Unfortunately, round three was 10 minutes on one side and 10 minutes on the other side of absolutely nothing. Rug wrestled in round one, nothing happened. Malkin pressed Rug up against the corner of the cage, unloaded on him, and then wrestled him. That was round two. Round three, lots of swinging. Round four was exactly the same as round two. Round five was exactly the same as round three as well. Just a lot of Anthony Malkin putting Rug up against the cage, beating the piss out of him, and then wrestling for about 4 minutes for the rest of the round. They gave Rug the win. I don't understand in any world how. Maybe they were just punishing Malkin for such a horrible, horrible fight. But yeah, Rug is the new one heavyweight champion by getting pushed up into the corner and having the piss beaten out of him and being able to take more punches. Not a great start or finish for the one pay-per-view card. But then we all tabbed back over to the UFC. Let's move on. It was Tricali versus Gore, the next fight that we watched. And look, I picked Tricali because I honestly believed that Tricali might try and bounce back and fight for his career. I thought maybe flying to the Middle East on short notice and doing a quick weight cut, that might have been why he looked so horrible in his last fight. Like, yeah, he's looked horrible in previous fights, but I decided to just give him the benefit of the doubt because surely you really want to be a UFC athlete, a UFC star. You wouldn't just get choked out by a rear naked choke and not fight the hands. And surely if you were getting rear naked choked and you really wanted this, you would at least go out cold. You wouldn't just tap immediately. But no, Tricali might be one of the worst UFC fighters we've ever seen since CM Punk. I thought maybe he would want to fight for his job, and I was wrong. So moving on, next one up. We had Damone Blackshear the Shear versus Cody Stamann. I never really rated Stamann, so I didn't pick him to win this. I picked Blackshear to win this. I always thought Cody Stamann, especially like recently, he never quite had the speed or the power that he needed to have, right, at bantamweight. But then also you add on the age as well. I never like picking older guys that never quite have that. I thought Blackshear did, and Blackshear ended up getting the win. So beautiful, beautiful win from Blackshear. At least we started to get some things right as the night went on. Next one up was Radke. Come on, Radke. I picked Radke. I really like Radke. Not just for the way that he handles himself on the microphone, but I really like Radke. I like the fact that he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's strong. He's angry. He got a KO. If you go back and watch a lot of Radke fights, he has a lot of KOs in his career. He's very, very dangerous. He kind of reminds me a bit of a young Dougie. Reminds me of myself when I was a bit younger. Angry, full of piss, ready to just get in a... I'm kidding. No, I like Radke a lot. I like his energy. He's great fun. I do think it was a bit of an early stoppage, honestly, but who cares? My pick was right. That's all that matters. Radke gets another KO. Started to cry a little bit in the post-fight interview. Not sure where that's coming from. He's just a very emotional bloke. hopefully he can get that under control and turn into a little bit of a Justin Gaethje as he levels up in his UFC career, learns how to harness a bit of that emotion and a bit of that energy and use it for a bit of controlled violence. Because right now he does seem like very reckless in there, very reckless in his post-fight interviews. We need a little bit more of that old school martial artist to come out here in Radke and just hone him a little bit, chisel him out of stone. And then we got ourselves a red hot little prospect here. Next one up, Alessio Zaleski versus Zach Scroggin. I picked Scroggin on age, right? And I watched some of his amateur stuff leading up to this card, and I liked the way that he looked. I knew the competition that he was fighting wasn't the highest, but I thought I would back the new, young, up-and-comer who's got a couple of finishes, undefeated, hasn't had a long camp, wants to be in the UFC, ready to get into the UFC, really wanted this job, gets called up on short notice. He's going to go in there against the vet who's had a long, hard training camp and now had his opponent changed on him. I just thought there's a chance here, and I like Scroggin. I like his spunk. You know what I mean? I like his style. And what can I say? What can I say? You can't get every single pick right. Scroggin got absolutely folded. It is what it is, man. That was one of those. I guess it wasn't a hard fight to pick, but I sort of went with my gut. My gut was wrong rarely on this one, but it is what it is. The next fight was actually an alt-tab fight. So we headed back over to 169, where it was Rontang versus Jacob Smith. Now, this was an incredibly fun fight, but Rontang is just so good. He is one of the best Muay Thai practitioners in the entire world, in my opinion. And it's hard to find him competition that can keep up with him. It was very entertaining to watch. Rontang is a crowd pleaser. A little bit dirty in the clinch, right? Headbutting him in the clinch. And then he just goes ahead and kisses Jacob, and then the ref tells him off and he kisses the referee. Like, Rontang was just in there having fun, styling on this guy, just landing vicious elbows and caving in his eye socket with the elbows. Like, Rontang is just a pleasure to watch any day of the week. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. Then we alt-tabbed back over to Dusko Todorovic, who got his ass kicked. Now, I picked Dusko because I thought some of that Serbian undefeated in the UFC energy would rub off on him. You know what I mean? He claims to be Serbian. He comes out under the Serbian flag. But when you actually look at Dusko and see where he comes from, he actually comes from Serbia's little brother, Montenegro. And it's not one of the biggest kingdoms in the area. It's one of the softer regions. So he's not actually Serbian, and you could tell in this fight. He fought like someone who didn't have that Serbian grit. He ended up on bottom, kept going for leg locks for some reason, didn't use a leg lock to create a scramble and get back up. He actually used a leg lock to try and get it in modern MMA at the highest level in the highest level at the UFC. We'll get on to this. Don't worry about that. At the UFC. So yeah, it was a little disappointing to watch, but hey, eugenics proves to be right in theory again. You're not actually from Serbia. You don't get that undefeated Serbian streak in the UFC. Next fight up on the UFC card was actually an alt-tab fight. We head back over to UFC 169, and this was a cracking little fight. This is when one was really, really showing off, right? We had a little bit of fun with the Rontang fight. Then one is really showing off here. Adriano versus Danny. So it was the guy who beat Mighty Mouse versus Danny. This is a rematch between these two. It was a great fight. Great skills, great striking, great wrestling on the ground. Adriano ends up getting the submission. Just an awesome fight. If you do want to go back and watch a couple of the one fights, watch this fight. Watch the Rontang fight. Very, very enjoyable to watch. We then alt-tab back over to the UFC to watch Gaston. And I picked Gaston because, no shit, I'm not kidding here, I just thought he was a bit more of a Chad. We're like this sniff test. He just seems like he has a little bit more testosterone. You look at him and you can tell he's got a little bit more of beer, red meat. He's got the smell of last night's pussy on him, but very little skill. But he gets in there and the fight just looks sloppy, and Gaston just sort of does it. And for some reason, the refs just chuck on a 10-8 as well. I don't see where the 10-8 was, but the referee just sprinkles on a 10-8 because you're watching that fight, and even though it's a mess, you kind of just know that Gaston is winning. And that's the vibe that I had going into that fight, and that is exactly the way the fight played out. So I was happy to see my pick with that one at least go in the right direction. And then we move on to Dorita from a former double one champion, to the mighty GM3. And I know you guys might be thinking, what, GM3? He's unranked. But let's not forget, right? There was one point where Ally Quinta was just outside of the rankings and he fought for a belt. And Jamal Hill, he was just outside of the rankings and he fought for a belt. And let's not forget the mighty Matt Serra. Wins tough, not even ranked. Gets in there and just demolishes GSP. And this is the sort of athlete that we are talking about when we are talking about GM3. You know what I mean? The dude is right there. He's ready to strike on a belt at any moment. And DeRidder was just styling on him, doing whatever he wanted in there. He was absorbing every single punch with his face like an absolute master practitioner of taking strikes. It was wonderful. The moves on the ground that we were seeing from DeRidder, there was some jiu-jitsu in there that we had never even seen before in our lives. He was making stuff up on the ground. He was entering the matrix and just moving however he wanted. He kind of looked like shit. He looked like shit against GM3. We're talking about a former one double champ looking atrocious against GM3. God, we have talked about this on this channel a lot, right? The UFC in 2024, it's a bit of a joke. It's a bit of a joke. When you look at the title fights and you look at the quality of the competition, the UFC in 2024 has turned into a little bit of a joke. And then we have the PFL, right? And if PFL is a joke, and then we have a one double champion stepping into the UFC against GM3, and he's looking like a bit of a joke here. What are we doing? Genuinely, I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Is MMA a sport, or is it just a bunch of dickheads punching on? Because this was the moment where I'm sitting there going, what are we doing here? I don't know. And then to back that up, we get into the UFC 100 main event. Speaking of MMA not even being a real sport, we get into the main event. And the main event consists of someone who is one of the greatest gatekeepers our sport has ever seen. A grizzly old vet that is sort of well-rounded everywhere except for taking leg kicks. But he is a true, solid, MMA athlete. Neil Magny. He's been in the top 15 for as long as any of us have been watching the sport. Even the old grey faded tap out beanie, since before tap out was even around. Neil Magny's been in the top 15. And then this bloke comes in his fourth fight in the best organization in the world, who smokes cigarettes during fight week and just puts the old vet away quicker than the amount of time it takes to smoke a bloody Marlboro Red. That sort of sums up this weekend. Really fun. But I'm not going to lie, by the time one was done and I had finished watching their main event, which was just horrible, and their co-main event, which was just a complete mismatch, and then the UFC Apex main event, which was a smoker just destroying a grizzled old vet with one punch, and then I'm looking at what's coming next week. What is MMA right now? It's sort of like, just go in there and swing it. There's a reason Dricus du Plessis is a champion with his technique. I really have to think about what we're doing here. What is this sport? I don't know if it is a sport anymore. So yeah, I called Carlos Prates to win. Prates gets it done. He must be soaking his knuckles in petrol because he just touches people and they go to sleep. It was a clean shot right on the temple. The second it landed on the temple, Magny was just out cold. Prates is like, laters, see ya. And that was it. That was the main event, and it was great. It was great fun. It was a great weekend. It was great to watch them both. Great to watch them both simultaneously. We'll be back doing the live streams this week. If you enjoyed this breakdown and the way that I cover fights, g'day, my name is Dougie. I try and make an MMA video every single day. I go live about 3 times a week. We're going to be doing that again this week. So yeah, hit that subscribe button and come and join the journey. But I need a minute to just really think about what the hell we're doing here watching this sport. Sport is a very loose way to describe MMA. MMA is more of a series of events with a bunch of blokes that are willing to give up their brain cells. That is sort of the way that you surmise MMA. Sport, I'm really not sure about that anymore. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button down there. And until then, you guys have a great week, and I'll see you all in the next video.